As I wander on by the evening shades to watch the shadows play, then I listen to the call of the whip.
Carolina, out of Craven County. A couple years back, he was 880 pounds harvested by a hunter. I'm quite sure there's one just as large or larger out there. In fact, we had one hit by a car not too long ago that we believe was likely going to beat that record, but we weren't able to weigh it and get the measurements, things of that nature. So there's some big boys out there on the coast. So how are they getting that big? Well, they're mostly eating plants. They are omnivorous, so they'll eat some animal matter as well. But in the springtime, when they're kind of getting their metabolism back up and running, they're going to be going after things like leaf grasses, roots, shoots, certainly forbs as well. So you see berry corn up there. That's a pretty common one. And then we also hear it called squaw root. I think there's about 500 names for that plant. But then when we get into the warmer months, they'll start going after things like blueberries, what we call soft mass. So blueberries, blackberries, chokecherry, serviceberry, any of those kind of fruit type species. When we get into the fall time, that's when our acorns start producing. Our oak trees, particularly our white oaks, will produce acorns around that time, and that's their favorite. So they're going to be bulking up on acorns in the fall. You see some insects over here, so that's going to be mostly in the spring and summer as well. You might see them come through your backyard and dig up a wasp nest or a hornet's nest, something of that nature. Really what they're going after are those grubs, that larva in there. That's a really good protein, really good calorie source for them. So they love that and kind of helps us out too, right? We don't like hornets hanging around our backyard. You'll also see them in the fall go after a lot of agriculture, things like soybeans, peanuts, corn. They will tear up a cornfield like it's nothing. It's basically a bear buffet for them. So they'll go after that in the fall time, really whenever they can get it. And of course livestock, any sort of small mammals they can get their hands on. In the springtime when the fawns drop, they'll pick up fawns as well. They're one of the largest predators of fawns. So coyotes get a bad rap, but black bears are just as bad. A lot of people don't realize that. And we kind of have an other in here, so we'll certainly feed on detritus of carcasses, roadkill, winter kills, leftovers from another animal, anything like that as well. So what will they eat if it's available? Pretty much anything and everything. You see a bird feeder up here, hummingbird feeders, and that's I believe a third-story balcony right there, just for some reference. We have some pet food here as well. Of course, garbage, baby diapers, you name it, they'll eat it. It's pretty ridiculous. So they do get pretty big, but the reason why they're going after these is because it's an easy source of food for them. To just come into your backyard, pick up a bird feeder, and be on their way. You just got it hanging right there. There's nothing really stopping them, of course, as well. And one of those bird feeders, an average bird feeder holds 5 to 7 pounds of bird seed. And we kind of think of that sunflower mix that you can get at Walmart. It's super common. That, about 7 pounds of bird feed holds 20,000 calories for a bear. When they sit down and consume the entire thing. So for reference, during this time of year in the fall, when they're bulking up for the winter months, it's going to be 20,000 that they're trying to get to every day minimum. So that bird feeder is a great resource for them, particularly around this time. In the spring and summer, they're consuming much less calories, anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000 per day is their goal. So a bird feeder is 4 days worth of food for them in that case. So that's kind of why they go after bird feeders a lot. Garbage, of course, we have a lot of yummy, fattening type foods in there as well. So that's why that's a great resource. Hummingbird feeders, average hummingbird feeder has about 2,000 calories in it. So just kind of getting you guys in the mindset of why they're going after these sorts of foods. So I'm going to talk about their senses. They have some really great senses, and I'm going to pass around the skull here a little bit. It's made of plastic, so it's not inky or anything, but they have great eyesight. It's pretty comparable to ours. They don't have great distance vision, so you might see them stand up on their hind legs to get a better view. A lot of people see this as being an aggressive behavior. It's actually just curiosity. They're trying to figure out what you are. So if you think about it, if you are bent over in your garden pulling weeds, you think you see a bear out of the corner of your eye, you're probably going to stand up, turn around, and get a better look at it, right? Try to figure out if that's really a bear. They do the same exact thing because their distance vision isn't so great. But they can also see in color. They do have a little bit of trouble with that red and yellow end of the spectrum, but their eyesight is pretty similar to ours. Their hearing is very acute as well. So if you see on Buster over here, he's kind of got satellite dishes for ears. So they can hear directionally as well as much higher frequencies than we can as humans. So they certainly know that when we're in the area, they can hear us coming before we even know that they're around. Their sense of smell is excellent, and if you notice inside of his nose, there's a ton of little channels in there, and what that does is it increases the surface area inside his nasal cavity, and when he inhales and those scent particles come in through his nostrils, there's more room for them to stick, more room for him to process smells. So because of that, he can smell a garbage can from over a mile away. That's kind of the conservative estimate. Most people put that at 10 miles away. Some will even put that number at 25 miles away. It's difficult to gauge that, it's difficult to prove that, but certainly knowing a bear can smell a garbage can from a mile away is all you really need to know, right? That's good enough for us. They also have a really strong homing instinct, so they're kind of like homing pigeons. They know where their territory is, they know where home, quote unquote, home is, and if you pick them up and take them several states away, thank you, sir, they will do everything in their power to get back to their home. And so for that reason, we don't relocate bears here in North Carolina. We've had some studies in other states where they picked them up, taken them 2-3 states away, and those bears a few months later have ended up right back where they were picked up in the first place. So for that reason, it just doesn't work. Along the way, when they're coming back, they get exposed to more vehicle strikes. Of course, other bears as well, maybe some humans who aren't so tolerant of bears in their area, things of that nature. So we see a very high mortality rate among relocated bears. So let's talk about their habitat and where they're living. Their home ranges can vary widely depending on the resources available to them in an area. So 250 kilometers squared is going to be the home range size of a male typically. They'll have a home range that encompasses the areas of several females as well so that he can breed come summertime. But this 10 right here is more indicative of bears in Asheville. They have everything they need right here in Asheville city limits. So they don't need to go very far to get what they need. So their home ranges tend to be very small. They are territorial as well, and they are solitary. So if you see multiple bears together, it's likely that it's mom and cubs. Maybe if they're a little bit bigger bears, they're the cubs from the previous year. So we do get calls about, I got 4 bears in my backyard, and it's a mom with cubs usually. And when they get of age, she'll kick them out and they'll have to find their own territories. But within these home ranges, there's of course going to be food, shelter, but there will also be travel corridors as well. They need to have routes that are unimpeded to get from one resource to another. And so that's why things like roads, development, things of that nature really hinder them from moving from one resource to another. Maybe it's from shelter to water, from nice little oak stand to a river, things of that nature. So we do see a lot of bears hit by cars in our area, unfortunately, particularly on I-40, I-26, and I-64 as well. So those are kind of the hot spots in there for bear vehicle collisions. But they can live in close proximity to people. A lot of people say that we developed their land and we pushed them out and they have nowhere to go, and that's just not true. We used to think that they needed these big wide open expanses of woodlands to survive, and we've found out very quickly, especially here in Asheville, that they're kind of like deer. They have adapted to live right in our backyards, right alongside us, and they just keep going about their habits even when we put houses right in the middle of their travel corridors. So you see here, typical backyard with a bear in it. I'm sure you guys are pretty familiar. If you're here, you're pretty familiar with that site right there. This is downtown Asheville with a walking bridge over the top, and you see a bear in that red circle right there, utilizing that walking bridge. I mean, that's what it's there for, right? And then you have more green spaces. So the Arboretum has some bears up there. Of course, our national parks and things of that nature all have bears that will utilize those spaces as well, even if you have humans hiking along there very frequently. So when it comes to breeding and denning, they're going to be breeding in the summertime, usually from June to August, with a peak in those first 2 weeks of July, is when they're really hitting it hard, going on dates. They're going to be reproducing every 2 years, and they'll give birth usually in January, maybe into early February. So you notice that there's breeding going on in the summer, but then they're not giving birth till winter, but their gestation period is only 28 days. So that's because, I know I get that reaction a lot, but that's because they have something called delayed implantation, which is an adaptation that they have developed so that if mama bear breeds in the summer, she gets to the fall and she didn't get enough acorns that year, she didn't put on enough fat that year, that embryo won't implant into the womb. So it may be that she doesn't have any cubs, or maybe she only has one cub as opposed to the 3 embryos she started out with. So we get a lot of calls in the summer asking about pregnant females. Oh, there's a pregnant female running around. Well, she's really just fat, you know, you just offended her. She's just fat, she's not pregnant yet. But yes, they will give birth in January after that 28-day gestation. And they'll give birth in a den. The dens can be anything from a tree stump to your back porch to maybe just a little dirt cup she kind of spun around a couple times. It all depends on the bear. And then she will have those cubs around until the second summer. When they're about 16 to 18 months old, she usually kicks them out to go their own way. At that point, we call those cubs yearlings, if you've ever heard that term tossed around. But they're gonna be denning from November to March. And again, the females who will be giving birth are going to make more of a true den with that protection for, so she can give birth to her cubs. But during the denning season, they're not necessarily all denning up for the winter. We kind of get this picture in our head of bears unconscious for the entire winter in a cave. And that's just not what happens here in North Carolina. They're actually gonna go through what's called, it's actually tortor with a D. But during that time, their body temperature drops about 10 degrees. Their heart rate decreases significantly as well to about 4 to 12 beats per minute. Usually it's similar to ours, so up around maybe a little bit higher, around 99 beats per minute. So that's a pretty significant drop for them. And it depends on the weather as well as in terms of how far the metabolism will drop. But around here, they have a false hibernation. So on those particularly cold days, like today maybe, you'll see them bed down a little bit. Maybe they'll get under a porch, get into a tree stump, something of that nature. But once that weather comes back around and we have those warmer temperatures, they're going to get back up and be active again. So it's not uncommon for us to see a bear moving around in the middle of January, February, December, you name it. So that's kind of significant to our specific bears here in North Carolina. So I get asked a lot, it's a little bit small, but I get asked a lot what happens when you encounter a bear. What do I do? And the best thing to do in the vast majority of these situations is to stop when you see the bear, stay calm, and then back away slowly. Keeping your eye on the bear so you know where the bear is going, making sure you're moving at a brisk but slow pace. Again, just being calm and going backwards. If you come around the corner and you and the bear are at a very close distance, in that scenario, you want to act big and crazy and as loud and scary as you can, and then again, back away in the opposite direction as best you can. You want to make sure you pay attention to where the bear moves off, because these bears are very timid when it comes to fight or flight. They're definitely on that flight end of the spectrum, so he's probably going to try to get away from you just as you're trying to get away from him. You want to make sure that if your trail loops around this way and the bear runs off in that direction, you're not going to just encounter them again. So just be smart about it, stay calm. You can also use some of these air horns up here, any sort of noise maker. Some people carry rocks in a tin can, that works great too. A whistle works great, anything to make loud noises. As I was saying earlier too as well, excuse me, you can take some jingle bells, whistle as you walk, things of that nature, just to let the bear know that you're coming in the first place. So they'll probably clear out before you even get in one of those scenarios. Another situation is in a building by a dumpster or coming around the corner. And so when I say in a building, kind of mean in your house in this situation. Bears inside of houses are very common in Nashville, more common than we would like, of course, but it does happen. So if you do encounter a bear in your house, and we have had situations where, you know, a couple's upstairs getting ready for bed, wife walks downstairs and, oh, there's a bear in the kitchen. It can happen like that. So in that scenario, make sure the bear has an escape route, make sure it can get away. So don't close the front door if that's where it likely came in, things of that nature. If you can open the window, that's great. Give them an escape route to get away from you. Make sure you stay calm, you get yourself out of the building as well. So don't try to close it into the bathroom or something of that nature. That's not good for the bear. It's also not great for your wallet. You'll have to renovate your bathroom after that for sure. So be mindful of that, keeping your buildings, garages, sheds, your home locked up as well. A screen does not keep out a bear. They almost accidentally lean on it and figure out that they can get in a home that way. So be mindful of that as well. If you have lever style doors, or even the kind where you take your thumb and hit the small lever on the top, make sure you always keep those doors locked, because they do know how to open those up. The best door handles to have are the round traditional kind, because they have some trouble with that. So be mindful of that, keep it locked. If you want to have a window open, that's fine, just be right next to it so that you can supervise it. And make sure if you leave your home, it's locked up, windows are closed up, things of that nature. When you see a bear in your backyard, this is pretty common. It's all about protecting your space, protecting the human space, making sure that they don't associate our human things, human smells, human sounds with food. So a bear in the backyard, it's great to, again, act big and crazy if you can. Any of these noisemakers will work great in that situation. Spray them with a water hose, shoot them in the butt with a paintball gun. Anything you can do to give them a negative experience is the way to go there. And make sure you're switching it up as well, because they tend to get used to one sound. So if you're using an air horn every time, they're eventually going to figure out that an air horn doesn't necessarily mean anything bad. So switch it up if you can, and be consistent about it as well. And as well, with dogs, make sure that you always have control of your dog. As I was telling these guys earlier, 90% of physical interactions with bears have to do with the dog. So we had one happen in our area, I think it was a few days ago, I'm not sure what day it actually was, but it was a Great Dane, and the guy lost control of this Great Dane. Great Dane went after Mama Bear, and Mama Bear defended her cubs. So that's pretty common, and she should. I mean, that's Mama Bear behavior. But the guy went to break up the bear and the dog, and that's when he got bit. So the dog and the human actually had to get surgery after that. Because again, it's Mama Bear, she's going to defend her cubs till the end. So a lot of times when we see physical altercations between humans and bears, it has to do with dogs, and it has to do specifically with dogs who are not under control, not on a leash or something of that nature. So be mindful of that. Make sure you check your backyard before you let them out, particularly during dusk and dawn. However, bears are active 24/7 around here, so make sure you're always checking your backyard before you let the dog out. A fence isn't going to keep out a bear either. So just make sure you got control of your dog. So here's a video, and this kind of shows us what to do when you have a bear in the backyard. This lady does everything great, and it's a pretty big bear here as well. So if you react like this, the little one should also. So here is so you see she held her ground. The bear had an escape route. He could get right off the deck through those stairs. She also had some bird feeders on her porch. So after a scenario like this, make sure you bring in those attractants. Figure out why the bear was there in the first place. And even if they're at your neighbor's house too, make sure your neighbor knows why the bear was there, so they can act accordingly. So here is a scenario where a bear didn't have an escape route. This is actually in downtown Asheville, in the Fine Arts District. So you can see a wall of cars on one side, some buildings on the other, some people on the other. So this bear was boxed in, and he decided to go up. That was his only escape route there. But unfortunately, if you look through the window of that fence up there, there's also people there as well. So that's a situation that can go here pretty quickly. So be mindful of giving the bear some space. Look around, make sure the bear can get away. If you need to move yourself so the bear can get away, then do so. Because it's very important for them to have an escape route. But as you can see, that's a very timid bear. The bear just wanted to get away, and he didn't have an avenue to do that. So this is an example of a bear in a garage. And you see here he got into the car, and this right here is a metal trash can. It looks to me like corn or maybe some bird seed. Either way, it's delicious bear food at that point. So they left their garage door open, and the bear walked right in. And this is a bear that's particularly habituated. So this is a bear that has learned these behaviors over time and has started defending the food source that it has found. acts big, crazy, loud, and we have got to a point with this bear that it doesn't work anymore. So that's a bluff charge. You can see him popping his jaw. He makes a huff sound as well, all kind of defensive, get away from me type behaviors there. So this is worst case scenario. And unfortunately, this is what we are seeing more and more and more every day around Asheville. Bears that have learned bad behaviors and have started to defend their food sources. So let's switch over a little bit here and talk about our population of bears in Asheville. So we know a little bit about their behavior and why they're doing what they're doing. This is why we're having more interactions nowadays, because right in here you see we have about 20,000 bears here in North Carolina. That's the largest population in the southeastern U.S. We only have about 70,000 in the entire southeast. So we really are kind of at the forefront of bear management here in North Carolina. We have a lot of other states that look to us to see how we do it. We originally started in the 1970s with we believe it was about 300 bears was our population in North Carolina. Our hunters stepped up and said, hey, we're losing them, we got to do something, or it's going to be North Carolina without bears, and that just doesn't make sense. So we implemented a sanctuary system. So we have sanctuaries all over North Carolina, and we specifically designated areas of sanctuary where females with cubs were utilizing so that they have more space, so that they don't have a lot of pressure in those areas to raise their cubs. So we were obviously very successful. We still have a population that's growing a little bit, but we're rapidly reaching that kind of plateau point where we have a stable population. And that means we have the same number of individuals coming into the population each year as we have going out. So that's really great for us. We have made a full recovery, and we were the first to use that sanctuary system for bears in the U.S. So it's been very successful. If we look at the Southeast in kind of a different context here, so this is the number of complaints in the Southeast. So you see in red states, that's where complaints have increased. In green states, they stayed stable, and Oklahoma just didn't give us data that year. So you can see our bear population has increased, not only in North Carolina, but in other states in the southeastern U.S. But additionally, our human population has increased. So we've about doubled our bear population, and our human population in the Southeast has increased by about 28 million people since the 1980s. So it's no wonder we've got more bears, more people, they're coming into contact more often. So looking at our population a little bit more here, the hatch marked areas are where our current bear range is. So we have two kind of distinct areas of the state with bears. You see the Piedmont doesn't have any hatch marks, so we don't have an established population there as of yet. But we do have bears that will wander through every once in a while, particularly those young ones looking for a territory of their own. But in our mountain population over here, we have somewhere around 7,000 bears. We have almost twice the number out on the coast. Does that surprise anybody? Yeah, so we have a lot more space for them out on the coast. It's a lot more rural, so it's a bit more wide open. As you can see here, this coloration in here depicts the development that's projected by the year 2030 in the state of North Carolina. So you see a lot of development here in the Piedmont, a lot of green, this teal color is low development, and a lot of red and yellow starting to pop up here in the mountains. So we do have a lot less space for them in the mountains. We also have a lot of agriculture out on the coast as well. And if you remember, I said a cornfield is like a bear buffet for them. So that's a great resource. We also have some swamplands, marshlands that are great habitat for bears as well. So they've got a lot going for them out on the coast there. To spread out, they can populate a little bit more. The climate's also a little bit more temperate out there, so their natural sources of food stick around a little bit longer. They have longer growing seasons. They come out a little bit earlier in the season as well. So yeah, about twice the number of bears out here on the coastal plain than we have in the mountains. So this is also looking at North Carolina, but now we're looking at complaints. And you notice here in this green, this top line is complaints we get from the mountains. The blue line is from the coast, and the red down here is from the Piedmont. So again, not an established population in the Piedmont yet, so very few complaints. That makes sense. But you see we have much more complaints coming from the mountains than we have coming from the coast. But we have twice the number of bears out on the coast. A lot of this is because of our population here in the mountains. We have a lot of transplants, a lot of people coming from areas where they haven't had to deal with bears before. Unfortunately, a lot of retirees are what we're talking about in this kind of category. We're also seeing a lot of this depend on mast as well. So mast can be anything from hard mast to soft mast. Hard mast is acorns, soft mast are things like blueberries, blackberries, any of those berry type species. You see this spike right here in 2018 from last year. That's because we had a mast failure last year. So not a lot of acorns around, not a lot of berries around. So they didn't have as much to eat out in the wild, so to speak. But out in those rural areas, they still have plenty to support them through the season. It's just easier for them to come in and eat in our backyards. Again, a bird feeder is about 20,000 calories for them, so it's a no-brainer for them to come in and get those easy resources. So we see a lot more complaints in years with mast failures or low mast production. This one's just kind of interesting to look at, a little bit more specific. The yellow is Buncombe County, the green is the entire rest of North Carolina. So we have 100 counties in North Carolina. Buncombe County, on an annual basis, gets at least a third, nearly a half of those complaints. And again, a lot of that's because of our population. We're a little bit less rural out here as well. There's more of a DIY kind of management attitude out on the coast as well. So people will call someone to fix their problems in the mountains, and they tend to take care of themselves out on the coast. So as you can see, more bears, more humans, more interactions, particularly out here in the mountains, particularly here in Buncombe County. So that's why we've really hit hard with our BearWise program this year. So BearWise is a regional program throughout the southeastern U.S. You see the kind of same paw print label here for each state. We want to make sure we give you consistent messaging. So when you see that BearWise logo, you know exactly what we're talking about. You can go rent a condo in Florida on vacation in bear country and still know exactly what to do because you got that same message here in North Carolina. So there's no guesswork in here. We're also the only program that is put on and managed, maintained by people who actually manage bears. So a lot of it is grassroots entities, maybe just citizens who mean well and they kind of piece together information from multiple sources. But here we have people who see what our bear population is doing year to year. They know what works, they see what doesn't work, and they know kind of what's going on day to day, month to month, year to year with our specific bears in the southeast. But BearWise, in general, it shares ways to prevent conflicts from happening in the first place. We really want to be proactive about these conflicts. We also want to give you guys resources to solve conflicts that you're already experiencing around your home, and then encourage community initiatives to keep bears wild. Because that also will keep people safe, it'll keep them out of our human spaces, and if you guys can come up with your own ways in your own communities with your own set of problems to fix those, then we are all about that. That's what we want to see here. BearWise.org, I specifically want to point out here, is a great resource. It covers, again, consistent messaging across all the states, so it certainly applies to North Carolina. But you'll get a lot of information on how to handle a variety of different conflicts you might experience. Anything from DIY projects to keep bears out of, you're coming through your front door, to how to enclose your beehives and things of that nature. So a little bit of everything there. Really encourage everyone to check that website out. BearWise certified communities are pretty new in North Carolina. We have a few in the process, but we don't have a certified community yet. Essentially, in those communities, we want to implement the 6 BearWise basics, which we'll get into in a little more detail here in just a moment. But in these communities, we hope to reduce human-bear conflict. There are some certified communities in Florida where we have seen these results in action, so we know it works. It also increases confidence of people just to go about their day, garden, walk the dog, things of that nature, with either knowing what to do when you encounter a bear or knowing that you've done everything in your power to keep those bears out of your community and away from human spaces. It also attracts fewer raccoons, any undesired wildlife, rodents, things of that nature. And it empowers you guys to be involved in finding solutions that fit your scenario best. So we give you guys a bunch of tools, and you pick and choose what's going to work best for your means, for what you're willing to do around your home, and you can implement those solutions there. So let's talk a little bit about the 6 BearWise basics. You see the bear paw here again, but you also see these icons, and we hope to have a set of icons for several different scenarios. These will be for around the home. We hope to have some for camping and hiking, for backpacking, things of that nature. So you can kind of see the icon, you know exactly what we're referring to in that scenario. So let's jump right into these basics here. The first one, never feed or approach bears. So this one's a big one, particularly here in Asheville. It really boils down to intentional feeding versus non-intentional feeding. So yes, we do have those people who stand on their back porch and toss out corn or feed handfuls of corn to bears, feed donuts to bears, marshmallows, meal wafers, you name it. But then we also have people who are feeding bears. They don't exactly mean to, but it ends up happening on a regular basis. So we see that more with bird feeders, maybe with camping, things of that nature, leaving food sources outside. So if you do see someone intentionally feeding bears, obviously that's not good. That leads to habituation of bears very quickly. They associate a human with food, particularly when that human is directly handing them the food. They're very smart, very intelligent. It's easy for them to make that connection. So if you see them feeding them unprocessed foods, that would be things like corn, birdseed, apples, peanuts, things of that nature. That's not actually illegal. So our hunting laws allow for baiting with unprocessed foods, particularly with bears and deer. So it does lead to habituation still. In Buncombe County, there is a local ordinance that says if you're feeding wildlife in your backyard, so if you have a corn pile out in your backyard and it starts to cause property damage to your property or your neighbor's properties, or it starts to impact public safety, then that would violate that ordinance. So that is a little bit of something in favor of the bears there. We don't have much because it is legal to bait with unprocessed foods. Now, if you know of someone feeding them processed foods, that is illegal. If someone's feeding them donuts, any sort of sugary candy, marshmallows, things of that nature off their back porch, that's illegal. We want to know about that. So you would call the NC Wildlife Helpline, which I will put up at the very end here. Some great numbers for you guys to have in your back pocket. So we do want to know about that, and we'll send a badge out there. Usually it just takes some explaining as to why that's bad and the route that takes the bears down in terms of habituation. And we can usually get that resolved pretty quickly. When it comes to potential hidden sources of food, again, compost, garbage, bird feeders, dog food, lots of different ways around your home you can be unintentionally feeding bears. So make sure you kind of take a little checklist around your home to see how you can maybe be unintentionally feeding bears and you didn't realize it until today. Number 2 is one of our big ones. So it's secure food, garbage, and recycling. If you remember, a bear's strongest sense is their sense of smell. They can smell your garbage can from over a mile away on collection day. So for reference, that's about 7 times better than the sense of smell of a bloodhound. So that's pretty significant. It's over 100 times better than a human sense of smell as well. So they can really smell probably from that 10-mile, if not that 25-mile range. When it comes to human foods, make sure that if you eat on the back porch on a nice day, that's perfectly fine, but you need to be there attending your food. You need to be right next to it. If you go inside to answer the phone just for 2 minutes, don't be surprised if you have a bear on your back porch. It happens that quickly, and it's always that one time you just stepped away for a minute, or you just forgot that one time. It's usually how it happens. So make sure you get in that routine of make sure you're always with your food when you have it outdoors, and then make sure you clean up very well afterwards. All those little crumbs, that can still attract a bear. When it comes to your vehicle, never leave food in your vehicle, even if it's just that McDonald's French fry that fell between the cracks. That can bring a bear into your vehicle. We've had bears break into cars over something as insignificant as a pack of gum. Because again, their sense of smell is very strong. So be mindful of that. Get in the habit of checking, making sure you're bringing in those extra McDonald's bags, those cups, things of that nature. Even a pack of gum, make sure you bring it in with you, stick it in your purse so it comes with you. If you have grandkids or kids and you got the car seat in the back seat, I am so sorry. I know how it goes. So you just gotta try to clean it out as best you can. That's what I get asked about a lot. You really have to make it a habit of cleaning it out at least every week. Whenever you get the kids in and out of the car, things like that. Bring the seat in with you if you can, if it's got milk spilled all over it. Just kind of thinking through those problems and being aware is the key here. Also, never leave your vehicle unlocked, because bears can unlock a vehicle just like a human can. So you see, it's nothing. He didn't have to fiddle with it. He walked right up to it. Wasn't even looking at the handle when he opened it. So this is another one of those behaviors that we see. Someone's got a bag of dog food in their car and a McDonald's bag in their car, something of that nature. Bear accesses that one time, they're going to start pushing on car doors. So if you forget one time you got a bear in your car, then you remember every single time after that to lock it. Don't be surprised if that bear comes back a week later, month later, year later, and you see those prints on the side of the car. Elephants get the reputation of elephants never forget. Well, bears never forget either. Maybe a little bit more so than elephants. I'd like to put those to the test one day. But it can take a very long time for them to realize that they can no longer access your car, and they will take that behavior to other people's cars as well. And that also applies to garages and sheds and your front door and screen doors and things of that nature. When it comes to garbage and recycling, this is a big one for us. The best thing I can do, the best free advice, if you walk away and this is the only thing you remember, I'd be okay with that. Put your garbage at the curb, or if you are like these guys, you have a specific area, try to get it out there as close to collection time as you can. At minimum, put it out the morning of collection. When you put it out the night before, the bears know. I mean, they are in the area that night before, and usually a couple hours before as well. They'll show up early, so they know when the dinner bell is, and they'll even know when collection day is as well. So if you're one of those people and you have the ability to put it out at 10 a.m. or when you hear the truck coming down the street, then do so, because it really helps to close that window of opportunity for a bear to access the garbage, access the recycling, things of that nature. It's also great to store your cans either in a bear-resistant, store your trash in a bear-resistant container. If you can, if you have a regular can, put it in a bear-resistant location, a locking shed, your garage. Make sure your garage is always closed if you're going to do that. Try to find some way to secure it that works best around your home. Not everybody has a garage. I've even seen people strap them to trees, put a chain around it and strap it to a tree during the week, and then put it on the curb on the morning of collection. So try to troubleshoot around your home, find a situation that works best for you. I want to kind of plug bear-resistant containers here because they do work really well when they're done right. So there are a lot of commercial options, a lot of fully automated options that work alongside these truck arms, so they stay locked until they're turned 180 degrees on their head. Then they will unlock, and when they come back down, they automatically lock again. So that is great because you never have to unlock your can. A lot of options, however, require you to put the can at the curb and then unlock it on collection day so that the garbage people can get into your cart. So there's a big variety of cost here as well. So those fully automated options can run up to $300 to $400. You can find some cheaper options, but they're likely going to be the kind that you have to unlock at the curb. Those are usually anywhere from $150 to $200, somewhere in that range. There's a wide variety, and so if you are one of those people, you don't have to have a certain can required by your sanitation company, then explore those options because there's a lot out there. Ace Hardware, Lowe's, Home Depot, they all have options you can kind of go and look at and see if you like their locking mechanism, things of that nature. There's also DIY kits here. You can retrofit your can, as we say, for about $30 and be pretty successful as well. Bungee cord's not going to work. It's going to have to be some sort of metal clasping system, latching system, reinforcement of the lid if you can. There's some great options out there, so I really encourage everyone to look at those as well if you are able to retrofit your can. There's also bear-resistant dumpsters. This doesn't apply to most people, but I always throw it in there because some people do use a dumpster instead of a sanitation or collection service. So when it comes to a dumpster, if you can keep that door closed, keep that latched, and then make sure there's no trash on the tops of the bins, that works really well usually. But there are some bear-resistant dumpsters on the market. They're just very, very expensive. But regardless, put your trash on the curb, put your recycling on the curb the day of collection. That's the best thing you can do there. So here's an example of a bear-resistant container that worked pretty well. Again, you see it's got some clasp up here, some little clips. So this one would have to be unlocked when it was put at the curb. But this is a bear that has routinely accessed this garbage can, and they switched over to a bear-resistant option. And this is the bear kind of trying it out for the first time. So you can see he can't get his claws up under the lid. He can't get the top open. All they really need is a couple inches to be able to. He can drag it around, do whatever he wants, but he can't get that reward on the inside, and that's the important part here. That's the important part to notice. So he's probably going to come back a couple more times and try this can out just to see if he can catch someone off guard, access that can one more time. And maybe a couple months from now, maybe up to a year, a couple years from now, he'll give up and move on if you stay consistent with it. So consider this, but also put your trash out on the day of collection. That's a great option. When it comes to bird feeders, bears are all about these calories. Again, 2,000 calories and about 7 pounds of bird seed. That's significant for a bear. So they're going to come after bird feeders quite often. That's kind of one of our main attractions, our trash and bird feeders around here. So if you must feed birds, we prefer that you don't when we live in bear country. Because again, our bears don't necessarily hibernate around here. They're up and at them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, twice on Sundays sometimes. They don't take holidays off. So if you have to feed birds, feed them when bears are inactive, so during those winter months. So bears are going to be active between March and November. So put your can out maybe start of December, and then bring it in at the end of February would be kind of a good range there. Make sure in that time though, if you do have a bear that stops by in the middle of January, bring that bring that bird feeder in for at least 2 weeks until that bear has moved on before you try it again. And if it comes back again, make sure you bring it in definitely, because he's just going to keep coming on back. So I say there's some bear-resistant bird feeder options. They're going to run you, the ones that are actually effective are going to run you $500 to a couple grand. And they look horrific in your backyard. I'll tell you that right now. It's concrete, steel, netting, all kinds of wires everywhere. But some people want to do it, so I always put that out there. When it comes to, not to call us out, we had a conversation earlier about electric bird feeders. But I've seen the electric ones fail because they don't have enough shock, or the bears can get the feeder down with just a swat. They don't get buzz, so to speak, and they still access the bird seed. Seen them strung up 20, 30, 40 feet in the air. That hasn't worked. Off of the 3rd-story balcony, that doesn't work. Even if you have it hanging out far over the ledge, the bears can access it. They can climb trees, guys. It's not too difficult for them. So I haven't found anything that really worked in the long term. And I tell people, if you figured out something and it's working for you right now, play the lottery, because your luck might run out pretty soon, any day. But do consider spillage, because sometimes spillage is more of an attractant than the actual bird feeder itself. All that feed that spills on the ground when the birds eat, that'll bring the bears in as well. And again, it's a slippery slope. Once they start eating the bird seed, then they go to your garbage, then they go to your garage, and then they're in your house. And once you get to that point, it's very hard to come back. So be mindful of that. It's the beginning stages, and it may not bother you in the beginning, but that behavior escalates over time. And then consider other ways specifically to feed birds in your yard. Pollinator gardens are great. There's a really big push for them actually right now in our area. So there's a lot of resources out there right now of how to have a pollinator garden that's also bear safe as well. Nest boxes, small water features, things of that nature can all be great ways to view birds, even sometimes a wider diversity of birds and a larger quantity of birds as well. So consider some other options that are available. So I say these because those are our big two. To kind of wrap it up in an example of how this can go wrong. So a little bit earlier in the year, around mid-September of last year, we did have a physical altercation between a human and a bear. It did have to do with the dog. And remember, I said 90% of these incidences happen when the dog's involved. But outside of the dog, there was also unsecured trash. There were many bird feeders in the area. There was a mom with cubs. I mean, this was a perfect storm kind of scenario. Everything was working against this poor woman. So Miss Tony here, she owned a property, and across the street she got some new neighbors. They did not get on board with putting their trash out the morning of collections. They were putting it out the night before. The female with cubs was routinely coming in and accessing that garbage. And so Miss Tony went out to let her dog out one last time. The dog was on a leash, but it was, forgive me, it was a small yippy dog, as I call them. So it was loud, it was barking at the bear when it came around the corner of the car. So Miss Tony didn't see it till she was already in her yard. And Mama Bear was protecting her cubs and also protecting that garbage across the street as well, and irritated by the dog. So she pursued the dog, and Tony picked up the dog and held it up at her chest. And so she received the brunt of the claw marks and things of that nature from the bear, all the way into her house to her front door. So this was a bear that had been exhibiting behaviors of defending trash, defending bird seed, things of that nature for quite some time. And we didn't know about it. Nobody reported it to us until it was too late, unfortunately, and nobody would get on board when they were making suggestions to each other to bring in the bird seed to secure the garbage. So this is how that can all go wrong. Unfortunately, in this scenario, the female, the mama bear, so to speak, had to be euthanized because she had been exhibiting these behaviors for quite some time. And it did resolve, and Miss Tony almost lost her life over it. So the cubs were then relocated just outside of the neighborhood, and they were, by all accounts, successful. They were large enough to go off on their own at that point, so we gave them that shot. But we had to euthanize one because she would have taught the cubs that behavior as well over time, and we would have had 3 bears with exhibiting that defensive behavior. So this is one of those situations where trash and bird feeders created this situation over time, and it eventually culminated in somebody getting hurt. So thankfully this doesn't happen very often, but it can happen, and that's how it starts with the bird feeders with the trash. Number 4 is never leave pet food outside. This kind of comes into play mostly with outdoor cats, somewhat with dogs as well. Just make sure you're only giving your animal 1 portion of food. They don't need to eat all day long. Try to put a quarter cup out at a time, however much your animal needs, and then bring that bowl in when they're done eating, because it can be pretty grimy and stinky, and bear sense of smell is incredible. Also be mindful of where you're feeding your animal. If you're feeding them on the back porch and you have that food every day on your back porch, a bear, raccoon, any sort of animal might come up onto your porch and access that. And consider electric fencing. I plugged this here because of livestock. So we have some people who will keep chickens and small livestock around here, and they'll keep that livestock feed usually in a shed or maybe in a garage, but then they feed the livestock, and it pretty much stays out there all day when it comes to chickens and things of that nature. So you can fence off these areas. But you can also fence off things like beehives, gardens that you're having issues with bears or even deer or any other critters in. So there are some options for electric fencing, and it's very cost efficient, especially over the long run, as opposed to a nice fence like this, which doesn't keep bears out at all. So don't fall into that trap of thinking, oh, I have a fenced in backyard, so I'm safe. Number 5 is often overlooked, and that's clean and store your grills. You lift up that grill, you smell your hamburgers from last week, right? It's a pretty strong smell for us, so of course it is for the bears. And when your neighbor's cooking and you start salivating because it smells so good, bears can also smell that. So keep that in mind. When you're done with your grill, make sure you're cranking up that heat, burning off those extra bits. If you can scrape it down, do so. And then pull that grease pan out, and don't just toss it in the yard because that just moves the attractant 5 feet to the left. Bring that inside. If you can put it in your freezer until collection day, that's awesome. That's the best way to go there. But make sure you're keeping that odor, those drippings secure until collection day. And then store your grill in a bear resistant location if you can, a shed, a garage, things of that nature where a bear can't access it. Once a bear finds out that it can get into these yummy grills and get those little bits off, some people go through 3 or 4 grills in the summer, unfortunately. So it does happen. And again, a 3rd story balcony is not a bear resistant location, so keep that in mind. Number 6 is pretty simple, and that's just let your neighbors know when you got bear activity going on. If you have a bear get into your garbage can, let your neighbors know. If you have a bear coming through and pushing on your car windows, let your neighbors know so that they can better be in that mindset of blocking everything up and batten down the hatches until that bear moves out of the area. The social media, things like Facebook groups are great options here. In addition to Nextdoor is a great option that I find a lot of communities have as well, and it's kind of instantaneous. You can put it out there for all to see, and once they check it, they'll see that bear activity, and they can maybe reroute where they're going to walk the dog that day or things of that nature. Also, BearWise liaisons and BearWise certified communities. There's one person who's designated to receive those complaints of activities. They can give you advice. They can report particularly dangerous behaviors to the NCWRC so that we can get involved and kind of help you guys navigate that process when you are experiencing activity. And also word of mouth. If you're out gardening, you saw a bear this morning down the road and someone's walking down that way, just let them know. It's kind of common sense there. So I say all this to really hit home here. These bears are usually just traveling through. They usually have a path that they follow that goes from a food source to a water source, or from one type of food to another type of food. And we give them reasons to stick around with our attractants, our bird feed, our garbage, our pet food, things of that nature. So when they're hanging around, they're more likely to get hit by vehicles. And Walt called me earlier today and told me that there was a bear hit on I-26. And one weekend we had 3 bears hit on I-40. I mean, they get hit all the time, and it's because they're traveling around these more developed areas. They're sticking around. They're also more likely to be shot, I say legally or illegally here. You are within your rights to lethal action against a bear. You can shoot a bear if it's actively causing property damage, so in that moment it's damaging your property, or if in that exact moment it's impeding your safety or public safety as well. So you can shoot a bear in that scenario, but be mindful of your local laws, because there's a lot of local firearm ordinances that would trump that law. So be kind of aware of where you sit with that, and also be mindful that if you wouldn't take that action against a bear, your neighbor might, or somebody in the next community over might as well. A good example of this is with our urban suburban bear study. We had a bear collared in Asheville in, I believe it was April. 2 weeks later, she went up to where did she go? Hot Springs, and then she came down, I believe it was into Woodfin, and she was shot on someone's back porch because she was in their bird feeder. So here in Nashville, we have a high tolerance for bears getting into our bird feeders, our garbage, our blueberry bushes in our backyards, things of that nature, in our human spaces. And just because we're tolerant doesn't mean that everybody else is tolerant. So just really think about that when you're making these decisions, that you're not just making them for yourself, you're making them for people in your neighboring communities, and specifically for that bear as it travels around. Also, it could have to be removed by agencies such as NCWRS to protect public safety, and the Swannanoa incident from last year is a great example of that. She had such escalated, aggressive, defensive behavior that we had to euthanize that bear. We like to come in and we educate, so just like here today where I came in and talked to you guys because Walt reached out and said you guys have some bad behaviors going around, bears in houses, bears in cars, things of that nature. We educate people, and usually if we can get people on board and explain why you shouldn't be doing things, it changes people's perspective, changes their behaviors, and I oftentimes have people leave my talks and say, I'm going to go home and stop doing this because I didn't think about it from that perspective. So we do try to advocate for that. In District 9, out here in our district, we've never had to euthanize a bear. District 8 had to euthanize the Swannanoa bear last year, so it doesn't happen often that we have to get to that point, particularly in our district. We do a great job, even though we have Asheville here. So we really hit the ground hard when it comes to education, and we see that very successful. But if it's a public safety issue and there's no return for that bear, we will have to come out and euthanize it because we do not relocate bears. So just remember, they're traveling through, we're giving them reasons to stick around. Let's wrap that up here with a little bit of the research going on. So you may see some calls